Welcome, everybody, to my brand new show called Idea. Basically, I'm going to be straightforward with you. This is a show for me to rant and ramble and yap about specific ideas that I'm passionate about, and to dive into topics that you guys might find interesting or that you might suggest. So as we go along in this video, if something comes to your mind that you want me to talk about or you want to learn more about, be sure to drop a comment with your idea and I will make a video about it. This is going to be a weekly show, and this is episode 1. You're here on the ground floor of the idea. So let's dive into it. The idea that I want to talk about today is something that I think really pertains as we head into summer, which is intentionality. And I hope that that's a word. To me, it's a word. But what I mean by this is, I'm a very, very big proponent, and if you've watched any of my content before, then you know this, of intention, of quality work, of making sure that you are doing things with purpose and you're doing things, in a way that actually affects your body. One of the things that I find so interesting about dance and just about our bodies in general is that they're able to adapt so quickly when we lead with intention, when we lead with purpose, when we really think about the things that we're doing. Our body's able to adapt and improve so fast. But on the reverse of that, if we don't lead with intention and we don't lead with purpose, then we can spin our wheels doing the same things over and over and over again and not improving. And that can become really frustrating for everybody involved. Whether you're a dance parent, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a dancer, it can start to become really, really frustrating because you're trying this thing, you're trying to do something so much. And we fall into this trap of feeling like the more we do, the better we're going to become. But that's not always the case. Because if we're not leading with intention and we're not leading with purpose, then that volume, that quantity is just us doing a bunch of stuff subpar. It's us trying to add value with low quality work. So the reason that this came about is because as you get older, you may share a similar experience to me where, you have kids and you have obligations and bills and these things that sort of eat away at your time. And slowly but surely, you start to have less and less time for things like training or, freestyling or taking classes. And as a dancer, that can be difficult. And if you're not a dancer and you're watching this and maybe you're just, some other type of artist, whatever your craft is, the busier you get, the less time you have to actually do your craft, which is an interesting paradox. So you realize, and you have to start figuring out how to be intentional about the time that you do have. When I do have time to dance, or I do have time to take class, or I do have time to freestyle, I have to be really intentional. I have to savor every single bit of that time. I have to use every single piece of my time wisely because I know that I might not get another chance for a few days or a few weeks. And then slowly but surely you start to put 2 and 2 together and you start to realize that I didn't really have to be doing that much in the first place. Now, don't get me wrong. You can do a lot of stuff with intention and with purpose, and you can get a lot of return out of it. And if that's you, that's incredible. But I think a lot of us fall into this other category of person where we reach a limit where we're doing too much. And that tipping point starts to affect what we are doing. So, let's say you're taking 3 dance classes a week. And you're really killing it in those classes and you're really being intentional and you go, okay, let me add 3 more. Thinking that, well, I've had a lot of progress with these 3, so let me try to take 3 more and see if I can have even more progress. And what happens is you reach your tipping point without even realizing it. You reach your threshold and you start to enter this phase where you're sacrificing quality in return for quantity. Now, not only do those 3 new classes become affected, but the 3 previous classes that you were taking get affected as well. So now your overall quality is dropping because you're taking on more than you can consume. So I think really it's just being mindful of, one, keeping an eye out for that threshold, keeping an eye out for when you feel like you're starting to have less purpose and less intention and less quality in your classes, and making the adjustments that you need to make. Maybe it's just a wake-up call of you just saying, okay, let me, try a little bit harder, or push a little bit more, or be a little bit more focused, or ask a few more questions. Or maybe it's having to scale back. Whatever it looks like, you want to try to find that sweet spot, because I promise you, again, like, you get to this point where you start to realize that you can get a lot done with a little amount of time if you're really, really purposeful about what you're doing and really, really intentional. And from a teaching standpoint, it's the same thing. From a teaching standpoint, I've tried to apply the same principle in the sense of, how can I give less content in my classes, but still affect a large amount of change, right? How can I give, focus on a few topics during class and a few things during class, even if it's just one, instead of a bunch of different things and having a bunch of them kind of land, right? I'd rather have one thing really land and stick with that dancer than, quick firing a bunch of things and none of them really land. Because then what happens, and I remember this vividly when I used to teach often inside of studios, is I would start getting frustrated because things that we had already covered get weaker over time and they don't stick. And then you're getting frustrated because you're like, you guys, we just did this last week. But because it wasn't intentional, purposeful, and meaningful work, it didn't stick. It didn't, affect the change that we needed to affect. And our bodies need that. Our bodies need, and our brains need that hard line path carved out. They need time to really consume something. They need time to really kind of dig into something. And so I think it's really, really important, again, wherever on the spectrum you're listening to this, as a dancer, a dance parent, or a teacher, I think it's really, really important that you're leading with intention, purpose, and, quality. And really asking those questions, like when you're freestyling, or when you're taking a class, or when you're teaching a class, asking why, asking the questions, why, how, what. Passively taking a dance class is one of the worst things that you can do if progress is your main goal. Because you're going to get so little out of the process that you're eventually going to get so frustrated because you're not getting a return on your investment. And it's not about taking the fun out of it. That's honestly the opposite. Because the fun of any art form is the expression, is the progress, is the newness, right? It's figuring out something new. It's breaking down a wall that we thought was there before. It's trying something we never thought we could do. And we can't do that unless we're being intentional. If we're passively doing something, if we're doing something the same way that we've been doing it for years and years and years, we're going to continue to get the same result because we're doing the same exact thing. Repetition only takes us so far. It only takes us to a point of, muscle memory and, consistency in the sense of being able to do something repeatedly. It doesn't necessarily lead to massive amounts of progress. You do need it. Don't get me wrong. We need repetition, but we also need that newness. We also need that, fluidity in our training that allows us to continue progressing and continue trying new things. Whew, that was a mouthful. How do you guys feel? Because this really is just a thought. It's an idea, right? It's an idea. And again, it's the idea that maybe we don't have to work as hard as we thought we did. Maybe we just need to work really, really hard when it matters, right? We need to push as much as we can when it makes a difference. And I think that a lot of dancers struggle with comparison. I think a lot of dancers struggle with feeling like their progress isn't heard or seen. And I think it's because, we're so consumed society-wise, culturally, with this idea of quantity, this idea of overworking, this idea of like grinding to get where we want to go. And again, I think that has its time and place. And I think that there's moments where the grind is necessary. There's specific classes where the grind is necessary. There's specific periods of your life where the grind is necessary. But you have to know when those moments are. And you have to know when the moments are to sink your teeth in and, step into an hour class and get the most out of that class possible. What does that training look like, right? What does training look like when you know you only have 4 classes that week, but you want a specific set of things out of your dancing? You want specific goals. What does that training look like? I think that mentality, that wiring, honestly takes you so much farther than the other way around. Because in the real world, we don't often get a lot of time. We don't often get a lot of reps with whatever it is that we're doing. We need to be able to learn and execute and finish the job quickly and efficiently. And again, if you're hardwiring yourself to know, okay, I've got 3 days of dance this week for 4 hours each night. And I know that this is where I want to be by the end of the season. So what do I really need to do in these classes? What do I really need to focus on? And making sure that you're doing that. Because if you're not, then you're not going to get to where you want to go. And I think it's also easy, and we're pivoting a little bit here, but I think this is just as important, is, not relying so much on your teachers. And I'm going to explain this because that sounds like a crazy take, but you shouldn't be in this position where you feel like every ounce of my progress is due to my teacher and my teacher is responsible for my progress. No. Your teacher is responsible for giving you the tools and the information and the moments for you to then be responsible for your progress. They're creating the environment, but you're stepping into it and you're doing the reps, you're putting in the time, you're putting in the consistency and the intention, not the other way around. Your teacher cannot improve you on an individual level unless you allow them to. And I think that's a really profound thing to think about because, again, sometimes we put too much power in the hands of the teacher as an individual dancer, and at that point we're taking away our own power, we're taking away our own autonomy, we're taking away our own confidence because we're thinking that we don't add anything to the equation necessarily. But the truth is that you add so much to the equation because it's just the old saying of like, you can lead the horse to water but you can't make it drink. You can take a man fishing but you can't it's not the same as teaching him to fish, right? It's this idea that like your teacher can show up and you can show up and you can go through the class and not necessarily progress by doing that. That's a realistic possibility. That's a real reality for a lot of us as dancers. There's a sneeze coming. Yawn? Sneeze. It was a sneeze yawn. It was a snon. Where was I? So I think that is like really, really something to sit on is like, how am I showing up in my classes? That's really the bulk of this idea today is how am I showing up to my dance classes? Now, if you're showing up truly, and if you're kind of sitting back listening to this and you're going, okay, I am showing up and I am doing the work and I am putting in everything that I've got and it's still not working, then we can look at the system. Then we can look at the environment. But I think so many times we jump straight to the environment. We jump straight to pointing the finger at the class or the teacher or the studio that we fail to look internally and realize that a lot of the progress that we're seeking, we can give to ourselves. It's not necessarily dependent on where you are. It's what you're doing with where you are. It's those little goals that you give yourself. I remember when I was training a lot and I was trying to get better at my craft and I was trying to get better at what I was doing, I had to really isolate, okay, what do I want to do? I want my textures to be really nice. I want to be really clean with my dancing. I want to be able to pick up choreography quickly. I had to approach every single class like that, right? it wasn't just, oh, I want to get better at choreography, so I'm going to approach combo classes and convention classes with intention. No. Every class I'm stepping foot in, even if I'm in a jazz tech class and we're doing across the floor, how fast can I pick up that across the floor? Even if I'm in ballet and we're going through, bar work, what sort of textures can I add to that bar work? The things that you want, you can apply to every single class. And now, again, instead of, kind of splitting your goals up depending on the style and depending on the class, you're hitting those goals in every single class that you take. Again, going back to that idea of intention, going back to that idea of purpose. That's the idea. And again, I hope you enjoyed this first episode. This is a show that I think I'm going to have a lot of fun doing and creating episodes for. And again, I want to hear what you guys want and need. So comment below. Let me know what things you want me to talk about, what topics you want me to discuss, whether it's competition judging or convention teaching or specific skills within dance. And I would love to dive into those for you a little bit more in depth and give you my honest opinion and my ideas around them. As always, www.nsadance.com if you're interested in mentorship, or if you're looking for an online dance critique, or if you want to join the club, which is our on-demand platform. You can find all of that information linked in the description below, and we'll see you in the next episode.